Joe Biden, in any number of polls we're looking at, except from Fox News and except from Echelon Insights, is actually beating Trump with that over 65 crowd. He was close in the 2020 election. I think the margin was about 3 percentage points in that general. But this time around, he's got a lead up to 22 points, which is astronomical. The 2020 mark was the highest share of that demographic that a Democrat had gotten this century. So that would be a pretty big swing in the election.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by White House reporter Christian Datoc. Christian, President Biden's gotten some good news in the polling with some older voters. You've written a story about this where you've looked into the data. Is this a mirage, or is this really a positive development for the president?
Well, depending on who you ask, this could be a big development for Biden. You know, just first and foremost, everyone knows senior citizens, voters over 65, tend to vote to the right of the general electorate. That being said, Joe Biden, in any number of polls we're looking at, except from Fox News and except from Echelon Insights, is actually beating Trump with that over 65 crowd. He was close in the 2020 election. I think the margin was about 3 percentage points in that general. But this time around, he's got a lead up to 22 points, which is astronomical. The 2020 mark was the highest share of that demographic that a Democrat had gotten this century. So that would be a pretty big swing in the election. Now, pollsters I've talked to, some discount that because of the fact that we can't really trust polling dating back to Trump's 2016 win. That being said, Adam Geller, who was a Trump pollster in 2016 and 2020, thinks it's absolutely natural for this to happen, namely because of how generational politics works. He mentioned to me that, you know, the Vietnam protesters, the hippie grandmas, as he put it, are now aged into that senior citizen category. So it makes sense that that demo is moving slightly to the left when it comes to general elections.
And it would be good news for Biden in the sense that these tend to be pretty reliable voters.
Absolutely. They turn out like no other demographic, older folks do, retirees. And it goes to show, you know, everything he's been talking about in terms of Medicare, keeping the ACA, dating back to the State of the Union in 2023, seems to be resonating. And of course, it probably helps that, you know, he himself, even though he says he's 40 years old, but is an advanced senior citizen, although former President Trump also is getting up there himself.
They're not elder millennials, they are advanced senior citizens.
That's true.
So something that might appeal a little bit more to younger voters would be some kind of leniency towards Julian Assange. Is there any talk of that in the Biden White House?
It's funny you asked, Jim, because there is. Joe Biden on Wednesday, when he was hosting the Japanese Prime Minister, was asked about Australia's request to end the prosecution of Julian Assange. Of course, you know, he was the publisher of WikiLeaks. He assisted Chelsea Manning in obtaining and then putting up on the internet all of this leaked Army intelligence data, video, communiques, all of that stuff. And when Biden was asked about that, he said, quote, "We're considering it." This is a seismic shift from what the White House has said. In fact, the White House has basically avoided talking about Julian Assange. He was charged in 2019, I want to say, after his asylum was revoked by Ecuador with 17 espionage charges, a charge of, you know, malicious use of a computer, aka hacking, and this would be a big swing. There's a lot of younger folks who sort of look at what he's been doing over the past 2 decades, basically, and saying this is freedom of speech first and foremost. The government should be accountable, and the electorate should know what's going on in the inner circles of Washington.
So as we head into the general election campaign, election integrity has been a big Republican buzzword for quite a while now. And now former President Donald Trump and House Speaker Mike Johnson are going to get together and talk about it.
That's right. That's happening on Friday down at Mar-a-Lago. And it's sort of interesting timing because, of course, Johnson is facing this motion to vacate levied by Marjorie Taylor Greene, a huge Trump supporter, one of the most outspoken Republicans in Congress these days. And it sort of goes to show the fluid dynamics of the Republican caucus and just sort of Republican politics writ large. When you've got one of Trump's biggest supporters attacking the Speaker of the House, but then the Speaker of the House gets the backing of the former president, they're going to be appearing side by side. And though Johnson has, you know, on background confirmed that this is happening, he hasn't outright said we're going to talk about the 2020 election fraud claims that former President Trump talks about at almost every public appearance.
Right.
Now, he himself has said the 2020 election was illegitimate, but not because of widespread fraud perpetrated by Democrats. He thinks the local and state officials violated the Constitution by expanding voting access because of COVID. So we're sort of on pins and needles to see what Johnson and Trump actually say. It could be anything, so just grab your popcorn, I guess.
Get the popcorn ready. Thank you, Christian. You can read Christian and the rest of our politics team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.